Good day, everybody. I'm Jacques Roch here, Group Chic Manager for Refaline. Today, we are going to be launching our training courses, short training courses for many different health and safety topics that we present annually via online YouTube, our YouTube channel. You guys would know that we regularly have once a year specific topics by law that we present, such as noise-induced hearing loss, the use of PPE, and manual handling, among others. Usually you guys get a pamphlet, the same one that you see on the screen. These pamphlets are available. You can ask your safety officer or SHREC coordinator, and they can easily give you one that summarizes the current presentation that we will be going through. The reason for doing this online is, as you are all aware, COVID-19 has affected the way we do training. So we decided to start recording these short training sessions so that they are available on our YouTube channel, and you can then look at them at any time at your convenience. You can look at them on any platform, including a cell phone or a laptop or a tablet, as long as you have access to YouTube. So we will be uploading this onto YouTube once it has been edited and finalized. Our topic for today, as you can clearly see, is noise-induced hearing loss. We're going to talk a bit about that today, very important topic. And before we start, or to start off with, we need to first look at defining what is noise and what is noise-induced hearing loss. So to start off with, we can start by defining what is noise. Noise is basically defined very simply as unwanted sound. And that creates a bit of a problem for us in that that definition can be subjective and objective. So if we look at the subjective definition of noise, for me, noise can be something that I don't like to hear, or unwanted sound I don't want to hear. Example of that can be, for example, if my neighbor is playing loud music, which I don't like, I find it that it is noisy in that it is unwanted sound, but for my neighbor, he's enjoying the music, and therefore for him it is not defined as noise. So that can be very subjective. But noise can also be defined as objective, in that we can measure when something is too loud and create harm to our hearing and harm to the environment. So we could use both of these definitions when we want to define noise, whether it's in the workplace or both in our personal settings. When we talk about noise-induced hearing loss, we talk about hearing loss that occurs due to loud noise, and that hearing loss can or is usually permanent, and it is induced through different types of noise. We will talk a bit about many different types of noise, including the types of noise that you could be exposed to in Refaline yourself. Now, that noise-induced hearing loss can occur usually by means of two ways. One is through personal exposure. That, for example, can include if you put earphones in your ears constantly and listening to music very loud, eventually it's going to damage your hearing. Or you maybe go out to a club and you constantly standing in front of the speaker, which is very loud. That can also damage your hearing. So there can be personal exposure to noise-induced hearing loss as well. And obviously the one that we are going to be looking at mostly is occupational noise-induced hearing loss. And that occurs due to the type of work you do. So for example, if you are using a jackhammer to break certain refractories, that can damage your hearing due to the type of equipment and the type of task you are doing. So that can cause noise-induced hearing loss in an occupational situation. Now, because noise-induced hearing loss is permanent and it is not reversible, the only thing we can do at the moment if you lose your hearing is to fit you with a hearing aid. And you would have seen a hearing aid is something that fits around the ear here. You see some people walking around with them. That does not restore your hearing to full. All it does is amplify the outside sounds so that they can be generated into the ear canal and to help you try and hear a bit better. But there is no cure for noise-induced hearing loss. When you have lost your hearing, it is permanently lost at the moment. So because of the fact that hearing is such an important part of our lives, we use hearing to communicate effectively between our family, colleagues, loved ones, in the world in general. We also use hearing to be able to warn us for danger, any danger in our environment. So because of the fact that hearing is so important, and because hearing loss is not reversible, we also have to comply to certain laws and regulations to control hearing loss. And one of the regulations that we comply to is called the Noise-Induced Hearing Loss Regulations, which form part of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, number 85 of 1993 in South Africa. Many countries, different countries have their own forms of regulations, very similar to noise-induced hearing loss regulations in South Africa. But generally, we will just quickly talk about what the regulations say, the ones relevant to us here, and what is the responsibility of the employer, as well as what is the responsibility of the employee. Now, in general, noise-induced hearing loss does not only affect old people, which is basically a myth. It can affect anybody from the very young to the very old. It just depends on how much noise you are exposed to, for how long, and what type of noise are you being exposed to in your environment. So you can see here on the pamphlet we've got here, nothing can restore your hearing loss. Once it is gone, it is gone. However, the good news is that it is preventable. So you can prevent yourself from contracting noise-induced hearing loss and from losing your hearing in general. Okay, so let's quickly just talk about the regulations which I mentioned. And as I said, I have them here next to me. They're called the Noise-Induced Hearing Loss Regulations. Quickly, a couple of things that you need to know. So from the employer side, remember the employer is the company for which you work, the site for which you work at. The company is responsible to make sure that a couple of things are implemented to protect the employee's hearing. Those things include information and training. So information and training must be given to all employees who are exposed to noise at or above a certain level. Now, in the noise-induced hearing loss, a level has been set at which employers must put certain measures in place if employees are exposed to at and above that level. And that level is an objective level, and it is stipulated as 85 decibels noise rating limit for a time-weighted average. So this means that decibels is the amount or the unit that we measure noise in. So you can see there, a decibel is the unit used to measure the loudness of a sound. So we use that unit to measure the loudness of a sound. And generally, we can measure how much you are exposed to in your work shift. In an 8-hour shift, we measure how much noise you are exposed to. We use something called the sound level meter to be able to measure. And you would have seen that on some sites, we have the occupational hygienist that comes in and measures how much noise you are exposed to. You would see they fit you with a little badge sometimes, and sometimes they have a sound level meter that is positioned in a certain area of work to be able to measure the noise you are exposed to. We also have a sound level meter within the group check department that we use from time to time. But measuring noise is rather a complicated and technical matter. So you need to have somebody that is fairly well qualified and experienced to understand how noise works and how sound travels within the workplace, to be able to measure and calculate what the employee is exposed to. But a very so exactly like I said, we know that the regulation stipulates an 85 decibel noise level. So if you look at how much is 85, you'll see on the right there's a little scale that we've put in there, the decibel scale, and you can see it starts from 10 to 160. From my eyes, you can see properly there. And you can see the different levels. So for example, a refrigerator can hum at 40 decibels. You can have a conversation at 60 decibels. Some people obviously speak a lot louder, so I think it's sometimes louder than 60 decibels. But there you can also see that a lawnmower can be between 80 and 90 decibels. You can now start seeing that a hand drill is at 90 decibels, a motorcycle at between 90 and 100, a chainsaw at 100 to 110, and you can see a pneumatic riveting machine or hammer drill between 110 and 120. Now you can see at the higher end of the scale, there is something like a jet taking off, which is about 140 decibels. And then one of the most loudest sounds you can get is a gun being shot off. And we all know that is very loud. So that can be anything from 150 to 160 decibels. Now, bear in mind, I said that the limit is 85 decibels. So we need to understand what those noise levels are. And you can use that little chart to help give an indication how noisy some processes are or tasks are. However, the problem in the workplace is that you don't always have a sound level meter with you. So you can't measure how loud something is, and you don't know if it's going to be damaging your ears or not. And we have a very simple little rule that we follow or that we teach, and it's called the 3-foot rule to determine if something is too loud or not. So generally how the 3-foot rule works is if you stand in front of somebody, facing them face to face, and you stand shoulder width apart, arm lengths, about an arm's length apart, and you put your hand on their shoulder, then that is what we call the 3-foot rule. And if you can't hear somebody from that distance, in all probability is that it is at 85 decibels or louder. Another very simple rule is if you have to stand by somebody and you cannot hear them speak, then chances are it is at 85 or over in terms of the noise rating level. So you can use the little 3-foot rule. If you're not sure if something is too loud or not, just stand by somebody, put your hand on their shoulder, face to face. And if you cannot hear them or you have to raise your voice, it means that you are at that level or louder. Again, you'll see there's a little bar below that also shows you how long it takes for a particular sound level to become dangerous to the human ear. So you can see at 85 decibels, usually 8 hours of exposure, of a full day's exposure, it becomes dangerous. And 88, 4 hours, 91, 2 hours, and so we go up till 108 can be 4 minutes. And generally, noise-induced hearing loss happens in 2 ways. One is through exposure to low-level noise at or above 85 continuously or every day. Then you start getting damage to your hearing. Or it could also happen by being exposed to a once-off high-level sound, such as a gunshot at 160 decibels. That would cause permanent hearing loss, although it's only a one-time exposure. And generally, the problem with noise-induced hearing loss is that it is painless. You don't feel yourself losing your hearing. It's not like you get a pain in your ear and you then say, oh, well, I think there's something wrong with my ear, I'm losing my hearing. It is generally a painless process. So you don't even know that you're losing your hearing loss. And it's generally, like I said, the main problem is constant exposure at a low level every day, eventually in the long term causes noise-induced hearing loss and damage that cannot be reversed. Okay, so that is the noise rating level. But the regulations also say that we have to provide information and training to everybody that is exposed to noise at or above that level. And this is part of that training course. So once a year, we would give you the training required to be able to understand what the regulations say and understand a bit about what is noise and how it works. As mentioned, this is just a basic course for everybody that works in a noise area to be able to understand. We have a more advanced course that we give for health and safety professionals, where we go more into detail of how the human ear and anatomy and physiology works, as well as understanding the more technical aspects of noise, noise-induced hearing loss, and sound. Okay, so information training is very critical. Your employee must supply you with information and training. He must also do an assessment to determine if you are exposed to noise. So there must be a risk assessment done. There must be a risk assessment to determine what machinery are you exposed to, and does this machinery create a possible risk for noise-induced hearing loss? You also have to do what we call noise monitoring, and that is where your hygienist comes in and performs noise monitoring using specialized and approved and accredited equipment to determine the risk of you being exposed to certain noises and at what levels. You also have to, the employer also has to provide medical surveillance. So you guys would know that you go onto a medical quite regularly. And one of the things you do on the medical is a audiogram, where you go and sit in a little audio booth and you put the headphones on your ear, and you have to press a little button every time you hear the noise or the sound. That is to test your hearing and to determine if you are suffering from noise-induced hearing loss. And generally, we get a report that tells us then whether you are suffering from a noise-induced hearing loss and at what percentage you are suffering from noise-induced hearing loss. We then go and analyze all of that information, and where you are at risk or have lost a portion of your hearing, we will then send letters to both you as the employee and your supervisor or manager to warn them that you could be facing problems with noise-induced hearing loss and what to do to try and prevent the further loss of hearing. So those letters are quite important. Now, obviously, a question is, why must we care? Why must we worry if we lose our hearing? Well, as mentioned, it cannot be replaced. That is the first thing. So when you've lost it, you've lost it. But it can also affect your job and your personal life. So if you cannot hear, you cannot work. You cannot work on a site. No site will allow you inside. No customer will allow you to work on their sites if you cannot hear. And in generally, you will not be able to work in most environments if you cannot hear correctly. But also it will affect your personal life. So you cannot hear your kids, your wife, your friends, in general speak. And it becomes a huge frustration, not only for you, but for your family as well, to communicate effectively between each other. So it is a very important aspect that we need to understand, and that we need to ensure that we incorporate noise or hearing protection within the workplace and in our personal lives. All right. So again, once we've another requirement for the employer, according to the regulation, is to declare what we call a noise zone. And a noise zone is an area in the workplace that is at or above 85 decibels. And you will see that there will have to be a symbolic safety sign. You can see the safety sign there at the bottom here on this notice. It shows the little blue sign. And generally, when you see that sign, it means you are entering a noise zone. A noise zone is demarcated as such. And there's certain things you have to do as an employee, which I'll discuss now under your duties when you enter a noise zone. So the employer has to demarcate the noise zone. He also has to control the noise as far as is reasonably practicable. So couple of ways to control the noise is to try and maintain your equipment before it breaks down, to make sure that it is checked regularly. And if you find anything loose, to fix it as quick as possible so that it doesn't rattle, to make sure it is fitted on a firm surface. And we've got other ways that we can engineer the noise out. So for example, barriers, stuff like that, that we can fit to try and engineer as much of the noise out as possible. The other two things that the employer must provide is the employer must provide you with hearing protection or personal protective equipment free of charge to be able to protect your hearing. So you guys would see, we're going to talk a bit about, I brought some of the hearing protection in, and you can see, yeah, I've got a pair of ear muffs, and I've got some of the normal, don't know if it's going to come out, hearing protection that we use. Okay, and we're going to talk a bit about that as well and how to fit it. But the employee must provide you with hearing protective equipment free of charge. And then the employer must ensure that all these measures are maintained and implemented effectively. Now, I mentioned that the employee also has duties. And remember, we are all employees at the end of the day of a company. So we also have duties that we must fulfill in terms of the law. And one of those is to follow all the measures that the employer has implemented to protect our hearing. So for example, if the employer states that we have to wear personal protective equipment to protect our hearing, then we have to wear it by law. If the employer stipulates that we have to do certain things to certain equipment to protect it from damaging our hearing, then we have to do that by law. Okay. You also need to look after the PPE that is provided to you by the employer, and you may not change the PPE or remove anything that is provided in the interest of safety at all to protect your hearing. So you cannot change PPE and remove signage and remove certain equipment as such. You need to cooperate with the employer and make suggestions on maybe how to protect your hearing and those of your colleagues. If you know that there's a problem in the workplace with a piece of equipment that's causing problems in terms of noise, we ask you to please report it to the relevant supervisor or manager to ensure that it is fixed as soon as possible. You also have to report any problems you have with hearing directly to your employer. So for example, if you feel that you cannot hear properly anymore, we have to then identify it and see what is the cause of the hearing loss. Are you in fact suffering from noise-induced hearing loss? Or maybe are you suffering from something else that has affected your hearing? So maybe some sort of physiological damage to your ear that has occurred that could also be a cause of hearing loss. Okay, and then you must attend safety training in terms of hearing loss. So again, you guys would see sometimes we do this face-to-face. Now we're doing it online. So training is very important to try and prevent hearing loss. Okay, moving on to the next slide. So sometimes you would have heard of people that have a ringing sensation in their ears, and we call it tinnitus. It's a ringing sensation. It's a permanent condition that you have, and it usually occurs due to exposure to loud noises and noise-induced hearing loss after a couple of years. Some people suffer from it, some people don't. It is a very irritating condition that occurs, and it is also, there is no cure for it. There's nothing they can do to remove it as such. There is currently experiments with certain types of medication, however, nothing yet as such to be able to remove that ringing sound. So there's quite an irritating side effect of noise-induced hearing loss sometimes. And again, it can affect the way you communicate, and it can even affect your relationships at work and at home. It can affect stuff like sleeping as well. So it's not something you really want at the end of the day. All right, so how can you protect your hearing? Well, you don't have to have the hearing of a 50-year-old by the time you're 25. It's up to you to protect your hearing. And there's a couple of things we list there that you can do. And the most important one is identify noisy tasks around your site that may be harmful to your hearing. So we know in Refaline that there is some tasks that are rather noisy when we do them. And those can include stuff like brick cutting, so using brick cutting machines. We know that a brick cutting machine, the noise level can vary anything from 90 decibels right up to 120 decibels, which we've measured. So you can see that can be very loud and can cause quite a lot of damage to your hearing. So you need to identify those noisy tasks. And other tasks can include stuff like jackhammering that we do very often, even the use of a forklift on a regular basis. Some old forklifts, the noise level is at 85 or above. So we need to go into the workplace and identify as many tasks as we can that can be harmful to our hearing. This can be done via the risk assessment process. So you can consult with a safety officer or your supervisor or your manager to be able to identify those noisy tasks. The second thing is to wear your hearing protection. So you will be issued hearing protection to be able to protect your hearing. They're not always very comfortable. They can cause a bit of itching sometimes, but it's important in the long run to be able to wear that, and eventually you do get used to it. Now in Refaline, all our hearing protection has been tested, it has been approved, and it has been accredited, and all conforms to European standards for safety, as well as South African national standards or SABS standards for quality and design. All right, so make sure you wear your hearing protection where you are required, especially when you enter a noise zone. You must be wearing hearing protection at all times. Make hearing protection convenient. So make sure that hearing protection is always available if you're an employer. And if you're an employee and you've been issued with hearing protection, make sure that you can store it somewhere. Most of our hearing protection can be reused. So you can store it for end of shift for the next day. And you guys would know we've given you these little bags previously. I'm not sure if it's going to come out now. Let's see. Oh, no. We'll have to switch off the background now. But you get these little small black Refaline bags that you can store your hearing protection in, and they fit to your belt, and those are ideal to make sure that they stay clean and hygienic. All right. Reduce equipment noise. So again, like we said, if you make sure that your equipment is well maintained, well checked, and if you pick up any problems to report it, then we can reduce the noise as much as possible. So where you see something loose, where you see something uneven, or where you check your equipment and you find something not right, you need to report it immediately so that it can be repaired and possibly prevent noise in the workplace. Okay, then limit your exposure to loud noise. So stay away from noisy equipment if you don't need to be near it. Only the people that are qualified to work with the equipment should be working with the equipment. So for example, if you are qualified to use a brick cutting machine, then only the person doing the cutting should be there, not the whole group of people standing around. Only the guy that is qualified and that has the right sort of PPE and equipment to be able to protect him should be using that equipment. Okay, and then have your hearing tested. So again, like we said, we send you for a medical once per annum or sometimes even more, so that we can test your hearing and see if there is any problems with your hearing as such, and what can we do to try and prevent any further loss of hearing. Okay, so you get many different types of hearing protection, and you will see in this pamphlet, some of them are listed there. We have the foam earplugs. Foam earplugs, some of you will know, if you take it in your fingers and you squeeze it, it makes the shape that you squeeze it into, and they generally are made of foam. You can then put that foam in your ear, and it will then expand to fill the ear canal and cavity and prevent unwanted noise from getting into the ear. You also get wax balls, which we don't supply, and is not so famously used anymore in terms of hearing protection in the workplace, but you can still find them sometimes if you go to the pharmacy to look for some sort of hearing protection. And generally it's made out of wax that you can also push and mold into your fingers to put in your ear canal. You then also get ear muffs. I've got some ear muffs here. Let's see, nothing's coming out here today. All right, there we go. You guys would know the ear muffs. Yeah, you can see is the ear muffs. These are the ones we generally use, and ear muffs are generally placed over the ears as such. Okay, and you can see those we also supply, and is also a form of hearing protection. Silicone plugs, they also are sometimes provided, and they're the same as your foam earplugs, except they're made out of silicone. And generally your silicone plugs and your foam earplugs are once off used and then disposed of. The one that you would know quite well is the universal earplugs, the ones in orange. I've got some here. Let's see if they come out on my background. Yeah, there they are. You guys would know these. And generally these you just place in your ear as such. Those are reusable. However, there is certain rules when reusing earplugs. And a couple of those are to make sure that before you place them in your ears, that you wash your hands and that you wash the earplugs from the day's previous use. And the way to wash them is just with a little bit of soap and water, hot water, let them dry, and then you can use them the next day. So make sure that they are kept clean. You don't want to have dirty fingers and then get an ear infection because you haven't cleaned your earplugs or washed your hands from the previous day. There's also a very fancy type of earplug called a molded earplug or autoplastics. And those are designed specifically around your specific ear canal. So they are molded around a person's ear canal. They are very, very advanced in that they have, some of them have noise cancelling properties as well, and that they can cancel noise out before the noise hits the ear canal. But generally those are very, very expensive, and they are used for very specific types of occupations. All right, so to fit the earplugs, I'm going to show you using the universal earplugs. So in order to fit them, always again, make sure hands are clean. So wash hands effectively for at least 2 minutes or 20 seconds. Make sure that they are washed effectively with soap and warm water. Make sure that the earplug is washed effectively. So there you can see the earplug. Make sure that these are washed in a little bit of warm water and soap. Any soap will do, and let them dry. Make sure that the earplug itself is not damaged or cracked. Sometimes after a while they will crack. Okay, so you check the earplug, inspect it to make sure there's no cracks or any damage. Okay, and then what you can do is then literally start the fitment process. Now, in order to fit, if I want to place it in this ear, I have to take my opposite hand, put it around, and I'm going to try and see if I can do it like this. Pull up my earlobe. So I pull on my earlobe up and I place it inside. Okay, and I can let go. Same with the other side. I pull up. You can see there, I pull up and I place it inside. Okay, and if it is placed effectively, you will literally start feeling that pressure effect and the complete reduction of noise. To just push it in like this is not the correct way to fit them, because they don't form a correct seal between the earplug and the ear canal. So you have to lift up the ear a little bit by the earlobe and push it in effectively, and there you go. And you can clearly feel the difference, that it's sealing and that it's creating that pressure effect. Okay, so make sure you fit them correctly. To take them out, you can just pull them out. These are nice in that they hang around your neck. So when you're walking away from the noise zone, you can take them out and hang them around your neck. Regarding the ear muffs, they can also be fitted by pushing them over the ears. And these don't fit in your ear canal. They literally just fit over your ears. Make sure that they create an effective seal between this area here and the whole ear. So when I put it on, I make sure that it seals effectively. Now, you will find that they're not as effective as earplugs sometimes. So sometimes we will ask you to wear both the earplugs and the earmuffs, and we call that double hearing protection. And those are for tasks generally considered extremely high noise. So for example, jackhammering would be considered a task of extreme loud noise, anything from 150 to 160 decibels. So you would wear double hearing protection. The only disadvantage of wearing double hearing protection is that you cannot hear anything. So you cannot maybe hear an emergency alarm or hear people speak. So it's important that when you are going to wear hearing protection, that you inform your supervisor and you inform your lookout that you cannot hear anything because you are wearing double hearing protection. You also get sometimes different types. Let's see if this one. Oh. These are ones that fit to your safety helmet. I don't know if you can see there. There you go. These ones clip onto your safety helmet. And again, to fit those, you put your safety helmet on and then you push them into place. They literally are pushed into place, and you make sure that there's a good seal between the foam of the earmuff and your ears itself. All right. Now, finally, what are the hearing protection hygienes? So remember, again, wash your hands before you fit. Make sure you wash your earplugs or your earmuffs before you fit them. Make sure that you store your earplugs into a container or into the little bags that we give you to protect them from any germs that could possibly infect your ear canal. Make sure you wear them where required. Make sure that it is the correct hearing protection. So if you're not sure if the hearing protection is correct, you can either ask any safety person, the SHEC department, or any safety officer whether the hearing protection is right, the right one for what you are doing. Okay. And then again, lastly, anybody that has any problems with hearing, please report to us, to your supervisor, and to your manager as soon as possible so that we can deal with the issue and possibly see if there is a problem that we can prevent from any further deterioration in your hearing occurring. So thanks for the time, and any questions can be directed to myself or any of the SHEC people. Thanks for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this training session.